Imagine a small European country that, at the very height of the Second World War, managed to create an anti-aircraft self-propelled gun so effective that its serial production surpassed the output of similar German machines. It sounds incredible, but the Hungarian Nimrod was exactly that. A revolutionary combat vehicle capable of shooting down Soviet planes and penetrating tank armor with equal success. This story began in 1937, when the military leadership of Hungary realized a simple truth. The country needed its own mobile air defense capable of moving together with tank units and covering them from air attacks. The Hungarian military industry from that time represented a very curious phenomenon. Unlike many European states, Hungary possessed developed factories capable of producing armored vehicles. However, the country did not possess its own school of tank building. Military engineers understood perfectly well that an attempt to create a tank from scratch would cost an astronomical amount, and the result would turn out to be mediocre. After all, designers would have to make the very same mistakes that foreign colleagues had long since made and accounted for in their designs. Therefore, the Hungarians chose the smart path of buying licenses for the production of proven machines and adapting them to their own needs. Thus appeared the light tank Toldi, representing the Swedish Landsverk L-62 with small changes, and the medium tank Turan, previously the Czechoslovak T-21. It was the Swedish firm Landsverk that became the key partner of the Hungarians in the business of creating armored vehicles. This company had a very interesting peculiarity. More than half of it belonged to German capital and actually engaged in the development of military equipment bypassing harsh Versailles restrictions forbidding Germany to have modern weaponry. Through neutral Sweden, German engineers received the opportunity to experiment with the newest designs, and at the same time sell them to other countries. In March 1937, a Hungarian military delegation arrived in Sweden with a specific order. A specialized anti-aircraft self-propelled installation was required based on the already familiar Landsverk L-60 tank chassis. The requirements turned out to be very bold for that time. The machine had to carry a powerful 40 mm gun capable of hitting air targets at high altitude while maintaining the mobility of a light tank. Swedish designers set to work with enthusiasm. They proposed not just installing an anti-aircraft gun on a tank chassis, but creating a full-fledged combat vehicle with a spacious turret ensuring comfortable working conditions and excellent visibility for the crew. Moreover, the Swedes immediately declared that the new machine would be able to fulfill a dual role. Besides the main task of combating aviation, it was quite capable of destroying enemy armored vehicles thanks to the high armor penetration of the 40 mm projectile. Hungarian military personnel were delighted with such a prospect, to receive a universal weapon capable of solving two critically important tasks on the battlefield at once. In December 1937, the long-awaited prototype under the designation L-62 arrived in Hungary by sea through the ports of the Adriatic. The machine was immediately delivered to the proving ground, where it made a strong impression on everyone who saw it. However, the Hungarian military did not hurry with making a decision. The prototype stood in a warehouse for more than a year until finally, in March 1939, its detailed study began. Officers literally admired the spacious turret, powerful gun, and well-thought-out design. Approxima. It seemed that the Swedes had created an ideal machine, but the real test was ahead. Field trials, which were supposed to show the real capabilities of the new equipment in conditions maximally approximating combat. These tests began only in the autumn of 1939, when the political situation in Europe changed radically. On September 1, German troops invaded Poland. The Second World War began. And Hungary understood that its entry into this conflict was only a matter of time. And the side had long been determined by the political course of the country aligned with the interests of the Third Reich. The tests revealed a mass of interesting details. The machine showed itself from an excellent side. The gun worked flawlessly. The chassis demonstrated high reliability, and mobility allowed it to follow tank columns without problems. However, the military compiled an impressive list of remarks, the main one of which was the insufficient spaciousness of the fighting compartment. Despite the fact that the Swedes initially designed a spacious turret, Hungarian officers considered it too cramped for effective work of the crew in conditions of intense combat. It was required to increase the internal volume so that loaders could supply ammunition faster, and the gunner had more freedom for maneuver. In March 1940, despite the identified shortcomings, the anti-aircraft self-propelled gun was officially recommended for production and adopted for service under the proud name 40M Nimrod. It would seem a small matter, to start the conveyor and begin saturating troops with new equipment, but reality turned out to be much more complex. Hungarian engineers faced an unexpected problem. Although the machine was based on the Toldi tank already mastered in production, the quantity of changes turned out to be so great that actually, it was necessary to create a completely new design. It was required to completely redo the superstructure box, significantly widening it for the installation of the enlarged turret. The hull needed lengthening, which entailed a change in the chassis. It was necessary to establish production of a new turret ring of larger diameter, develop a gun mounting system taking into account the specifics of anti-aircraft fire, and create ammunition feed mechanisms. Each of these tasks required time, resources, and qualified specialists. Factories worked in a tense mode, but technological difficulties constantly slowed down the process. Only in October 1941 did the first serial machine come off the assembly line. By this moment, the war in the East had been going on for 4 months already, and Hungarian troops were preparing for dispatch to the front. The first contract provided for the output of 46 machines, and factory workshops worked tirelessly to fulfill the order on time. Production of the first batch stretched out for the whole year of 1942. Each machine required careful fitting of parts. Many units were manufactured practically by hand by experienced craftsmen. In 1943 and 1944, production rates managed to be significantly accelerated thanks to accumulated experience and debugged technological processes. The Honvédség, the Armed Forces of Hungary, received another 89 machines of the second series, which had minimal differences from the initial variant, mainly concerning small improvements in ergonomics and reliability of individual units. The total result of production was impressive: 135 anti-aircraft self-propelled guns. For a small European country with limited industrial capacities, this was a real victory. This achievement looked especially impressive against the background of German analogues. The Reich, possessing an incomparably more powerful industrial base, managed to produce Ostwinds and Wirbelwinds in smaller numbers than the Hungarians did their Nimrods. Now it is worth carefully examining the machine itself to understand what this combat unit represented. At first glance, the Nimrod really resembled the base Toldi. However, this similarity turned out to be deceptive upon detailed study. The armored hull was manufactured by the method of welding from rolled sheets with a thickness of 13 mm. This armor could not protect against anti-tank guns, but quite coped with shell fragments and machine gun fire. An exception was the upper frontal detail of the driver mechanic's cabin, reinforced to 23 mm. A critically important member of the crew was located here, and designers provided him with additional protection. The turret turned out to be truly spacious, although somewhat awkward in appearance. Its armor protection constituted the same 13 mm around the entire perimeter. Sufficient for protection against small arms and shrapnel, but requiring caution from the crew when meeting a serious opponent. The superstructure box underwent radical alteration. It was not just widened, but actually created anew, significantly increasing the internal volume. But even this turned out to be insufficient, and engineers had to lengthen the entire hull of the machine. A comparison of dimensions with the base Toldi spoke for itself. Length grew from 4.75 meters to 5.32 meters. Width increased from 2.14 meters to 2.3 meters. Height jumped from 1.87 meters to 2.3 meters. Weight increased by a whole 2 tons, from 8.5 to 10.5 tons. Such an increase in mass could seriously affect mobility, but Hungarian engineers found a solution that a 5-speed gearbox combined with a 155 horsepower German Bussing NAG engine allowed accelerating the machine up to 50 km per hour on the highway. Initially, all motors were supplied from Germany, which created a certain dependence on supplies. However, in 1943, Hungarian factories mastered licensed production of this engine, which significantly simplified supply with spare parts and accelerated rates of machine output. The chassis required serious changes due to the increased length of the hull by 57 centimeters. Designers decided to add a 5th road wheel on each side instead of 4 on the base Toldi. The idler wheel, located in the rear part of the machine, was raised above the ground, whereas on the Toldi it was located practically on the same level with the road wheels. 3 return rollers ensured reliable support for the upper branch of the track. The question regarding the size of the crew caused certain disputes among historians. Most sources indicated a figure of 6 people. However, this caused serious doubts among those who attentively studied preserved photographs of the turret interior. High-quality shots clearly demonstrated the presence of 4 workplaces inside the fighting compartment, plus 1 seat for the driver mechanic in the nose part of the hull. Thus, the real crew must have consisted of 5 people, the vehicle commander, gunner, 2 loaders, and the driver mechanic. Such a layout ensured optimal speed of fire and control of the machine in battle. Communication means were not installed on all machines consecutively, but selectively. Only command Nimrods, intended for managing units, were equipped with radio stations. Ordinary combat vehicles managed without radios, which was quite typical for that time and allowed saving scarce equipment. Platoon and company commanders could coordinate the actions of their subordinates using signal flags and flares at short distances. Now it is worth examining in detail the main merit of the machine, its armament. The Hungarians made an exceptionally successful purchase by acquiring a license for the production of the Swedish Bofors automatic gun of 40 mm caliber. This was one of the best anti-aircraft systems of its time, adopted for service by dozens of countries around the world. The barrel length was 60 calibers, which ensured a high initial speed of the projectile and excellent shooting accuracy. The ammunition feed system used clips holding 4 shells each. Loaders quickly inserted clips into the receiver, and the gun fired with an impressive rate of fire. The Swedes did not fail to position the Nimrod as a dual-purpose machine for nothing. Besides combating air targets, the gun demonstrated outstanding anti-tank capabilities. At a distance of 500 m, a 40 mm armor-piercing projectile penetrated 50 mm of homogeneous armor when hitting at a right angle. For the years 41 and 42, these were excellent indicators, allowing confident engagement of most Soviet tanks of that period. Horizontal guidance was carried out at a full 360 degrees. The turret could rotate in a circle without restrictions, which gave the opportunity to quickly transfer fire from one target to another. Vertical guidance ensured a range from -4 to +85 degrees, allowing firing both at ground targets and at aircraft at high angles of elevation. The first serial machines began arriving among troops in the summer of 1942, when the situation on the Eastern Front required maximum concentration of forces. Military command decided to form a specialized unit, the 51st Tank Destroyer Battalion, as part of the 1st Armored Division of the Honvédség. The organizational structure of the battalion included 3 companies with 6 machines in each plus 1 command machine. A total of 19 Nimrods represented impressive firepower. The name of the battalion could be misleading. Despite the official designation as tank destroyers, the main task remained the anti-aircraft defense of the tank division, although the possibility of combating enemy armored vehicles was, undoubtedly, considered and welcomed by command. The 1st Armored Division received an order to move to the southern sector of the Eastern Front, where a large-scale offensive of German-Hungarian troops was developing in the summer of 1942. The baptism of fire for the Nimrods took place in conditions of steppe warfare, where the vast expanses allowed full use of the machine's mobility and the firing range of their guns. The anti-aircraft self-propelled guns were indeed used not only for their direct purpose but also for engaging armored vehicles. The 40 mm gun with its high armor penetration turned out to be very effective against Soviet light and medium tanks. On September 16, 1942, in the area of the village of Starazilovo, a tense battle played out in which 5 Nimrods from the battalion participated at once. Hungarian documents recorded the destruction of 24 Soviet machines in this battle. Moreover, part of the victories were ascribed precisely to the account of the anti-aircraft self-propelled guns, whose guns methodically shot up Soviet equipment from advantageous positions. However, Nimrods achieved their main successes precisely in the fight against aviation, that task for which they were originally created. Soviet ground attack aircraft and bombers presented a serious threat to tank columns, and Hungarian anti-aircraft gunners met them with dense fire. During the period of battles of the 1st Armored Division in 1942, the destruction of 10 Soviet aircraft was recorded on its account, of which 4 machines were shot down specifically by Nimrod crews. This statistic clearly demonstrated the effectiveness of specialized anti-aircraft self-propelled guns compared to towed guns or anti-aircraft machine guns on tanks. Mobility allowed Nimrods to quickly occupy advantageous firing positions. Powerful armament guaranteed target destruction upon hitting, and a spacious turret ensured comfortable conditions for the crew for prolonged conduct of combat. Hungarian anti-aircraft gunners quickly gained experience and turned into real professionals in their field, whose effective actions were noted by division command. Successful actions continued until February 1943, when the situation on the front changed abruptly. The 1st Armored Division together with the 2nd Hungarian Army fell under a powerful strike of Soviet troops and suffered catastrophic losses. The offensive of the Red Army literally swept away Hungarian positions, tearing the defense line and forcing remnants of units to retreat in complete disorder. The division lost the greater part of its equipment and personnel, turning into a non-combat capable formation. Command made the only possible decision, to withdraw exhausted units from the front for prolonged rest and restoration of combat capability. The recovery process stretched for a year and a half. They had to wait long for new equipment. Replenishment with personnel went slowly, and training recruits required time. Only in the autumn of 1944 was the 1st Armored Division again recognized fit for participation in combat operations. Although by this moment the strategic situation had changed radically, and even to the most stubborn optimists, it was becoming clear how everything would end. Hungary turned out to be perhaps the most loyal ally of the Third Reich out of all satellites. While Romanians switched to the side of the Red Army, and Athens concluded a separate peace, Hungarians continued to fight with increasing fierceness. From the spring of 1944, Nimrods began arriving in the 2nd Armored Division, strengthening its anti-aircraft defense. Another battery of 4 machines was transferred to the 1st Hussar Division, which allowed covering this formation from aviation as well. However, the character of the employment of anti-aircraft self-propelled guns changed significantly compared to 1942. Now the Hungarians were opposed by completely different Soviet tanks. Mass-produced T-34s with their powerful armor protection and 75mm guns. Modernized T-34-85s with even more formidable armament. And on individual sectors of the front, heavy IS tanks with practically invulnerable frontal armor appeared. The 40mm gun of Nimrod, which even 2 years ago coped quite confidently with Soviet armored vehicles, now turned out to be powerless against new machines when firing at frontal projection. To penetrate a T-34 in the forehead from a safe distance was practically impossible. A shot to the side or rear part of the hull was required, which meant the necessity of closing in and maneuvering. Extremely dangerous actions for a lightly armored machine. Command quickly drew conclusions and forbade using Nimrods in close combat with tanks, unless the situation became absolutely critical. Anti-aircraft self-propelled guns returned to their original role, combating enemy aviation. And here they continued to demonstrate high effectiveness. Soviet Il-2 ground attack aircraft and bombers continued to suffer losses from the fire of Hungarian anti-aircraft gunners, whose skill had grown during the years of war to a very high level. A study of Hungarian military documents from the years 43 and 44 created a very curious impression. Practically every 5th tanker or anti-aircraft gunner looked like a real hero with fantastic indicators of destroyed enemy equipment. As if the Hungarian army consisted entirely of aces of the level of German pilot Rudel multiplied by tankers Wittmann and Carius, the explanation for this phenomenon lay on the surface. In conditions where Hungarian units often acted jointly with German formations and infrequently found themselves in encirclements together with German troops, a wonderful opportunity appeared to attribute other successes to themselves. A German tank knocked out a Soviet machine, and Hungarians recorded the victory to their own account. Who would sort it out later in the chaos of battle and in the absence of strict accounting? Similar practice flourished in all armies of the world, but in Hungarian documents it took on especially large-scale forms. In the autumn of 1944, Nimrods actively participated in the defense of Budapest. The Hungarian capital turned into an arena of fierce street battles, where every house became a fortress, and every street a battlefield. Anti-aircraft self-propelled guns were used to cover strongpoints from aviation and support infantry with fire against buildings occupied by the enemy. 40mm shells with their powerful high-explosive fragmentation action proved very effective in destroying barricades and suppressing firing points. It is known that at least one machine was at the disposal of German SS units defending the city. Although details about exactly how Hungarian equipment got to the Germans remain unclear. Perhaps this was a trophy captured from a defeated Hungarian unit, or the machine was transferred to Allies to strengthen their anti-aircraft defense. The last months of the war became agony for Hungarian tank units. In March 1945, German command undertook a desperate attempt to turn the tide of the war by organizing an offensive in the area of Lake Balaton. The operation received the code name Spring Awakening and was supposed to throw back Soviet troops, deblocate the surrounded garrison of Budapest and stabilize the front in Hungary. The last combat-capable tank divisions of the Wehrmacht and Hungarian units, including the 1st and 2nd Tank Divisions with their Nimrods, were attracted to participation in the operation. The offensive began on March 6 and initially developed successfully. German-Hungarian troops managed to push through Soviet defense in several sectors and advance deep for tens of kilometers. Anti-aircraft gunners on Nimrods worked tirelessly, repelling continuous attacks of Soviet assault aviation striving to stop the offensive with massive strikes on tank columns.